The whistle for the penalty had not even finished ringing before 31,000 people started screaming my name like it was a curse word. Minute 121, extra time, the National Cup final, tied 2-2, and the referee was pointing at the spot after Ashcombe City's centre-back hauled me down from behind. I picked the ball up myself. Nobody argued with me. I was the club's top scorer that season, and everyone in Halbury Stadium expected me to settle it right there. I placed the ball down. I looked at the goalkeeper, and for 1 second, less than a second, I hesitated on my run-up, changed my mind about which side I was going, and put the ball 2 feet wide of the post. Mireport Athletic lost the National Cup final in the last kick of the match, and within an hour, half the country believed I had done it on purpose because 11 years earlier, before anyone outside Mireport knew my name, I had grown up in the youth academy of the club we had just lost to. They called me a traitor. What none of them knew, not the fans, not the journalists, not even my own teammates, was what my manager had pulled me aside to tell me 40 minutes before kickoff. I need to start from the beginning, because the miss only makes sense once you understand what came before it. My name is Sam Whitlock. I joined Camden Rovers Academy at 8 years old, 2 bus rides from my house every single day, because my mum believed in me before I believed in myself. I spent 9 years there. Age 17, 3 weeks before I was due to sign my first professional contract, the academy director called me into his office and told me they were releasing me. Not because I wasn't good enough, because a director's nephew needed the spot on the roster and somebody had to make room. Mireport Athletic picked me up a month later, a smaller club, a lower league, a stadium that held a third of what Camden's did. This season, Mireport reached the National Cup final for the first time in 38 years. Our opponents were Camden Rovers. The build-up was unbearable. Sports shows ran my release story on a loop. My old academy director gave an interview saying he always knew I'd amount to something, which made me want to put my fist through a wall, because he was the same man who told me I wasn't good enough 11 years earlier. Camden's own supporters started a chant with my name in it, one that wasn't kind. Mireport's fans, in return, treated the final like a chance to finally settle something that had nothing to do with a trophy. 3 days before the final, our video analyst, a quiet man named Grant Aldous, resigned. He told the club he had a family emergency and needed to leave immediately. Nobody thought much of it at the time. We had a final to prepare for. Michael Dunmore, my closest friend in the squad, told me privately in the canteen that I should stop reading anything with my name in the headline until after the final. I tried. I lasted about a day before I was back on my phone at midnight, reading comments from people who had never met me, deciding what kind of person I was. I noticed something odd during that same week, though. I didn't understand it until much later. Grant had spent an unusual amount of time with me in the weeks before, asking detailed questions about my penalty routine, which corner I preferred under pressure, whether I changed my technique in extra time when I was tired. I assumed it was normal analysis work. Players get asked that all the time. The night before the final, my manager, Derek Voss, called a short team meeting and told us nothing had changed, that we would play our normal game. But 40 minutes before kickoff, he pulled me into the physio room alone, away from the rest of the squad. He told me he had received a call that morning from a contact at Camden Rovers, someone who used to work with him years earlier. Grant Aldous had been offered a senior analyst job at Camden Rovers, a job with more money and more security than we could ever give him.
and the offer had come through less than a week before he suddenly resigned from our club. Derek said he had no proof of anything wrong. He wasn't accusing Grant of a crime. He simply told me, quietly, that if the moment came where I had to take a penalty in this final, I should trust my instincts over habit, and if something about the goalkeeper's positioning felt rehearsed, I should be ready to change my mind at the very last second. I didn't fully understand what he meant. I told him I'd be fine. I always was.
The match itself was as tight as everyone expected. Camden took the lead in the 18th minute through a header from a corner. We equalised just before half-time when I turned in a low cross from our right back, Michael Dunmore. Camden went back in front in the 63rd minute with a deflected shot that our goalkeeper had no chance to save. I levelled it again in the 85th minute, a header of my own, and the ground was so loud I couldn't hear the final whistle of normal time, even though I was standing right on the pitch. Extra time ground on, both sides exhausted, neither one able to find a winner through open play. Then, in the 121st minute, their centre-back caught my heel as I turned inside the box, and I went down. The referee pointed to the spot without hesitation. As I picked the ball up, I thought about what Derek had said in the physio room. I looked at their goalkeeper, a young Belgian named Yuri Myers, and something about the way he was standing felt different from how he usually set up. He was leaning his weight very slightly toward my left, the side he had almost never guessed correctly against me in 3 previous meetings between our clubs. I placed the ball. I took my usual run-up, planning to go to my right as always. 2 steps before contact, I remembered Derek's warning, and I changed my mind mid-run, trying to send it left instead, toward the side Myers wasn't leaning. My body was already committed to the old technique. The change threw off my balance by a fraction. My ankle rolled slightly on the plant foot, and the ball sailed 2 feet wide of the left post. I never even needed him to save it. I beat myself with my own hesitation. The final went to a penalty shootout after that, and we lost it 4 kicks to 3. I didn't take another penalty in the shootout. My manager didn't ask me to, and I didn't argue. The reaction was instant and brutal. Camden supporters celebrated my miss louder than they celebrated their own goals. Meerport supporters, still in shock, needed somewhere to put their anger, and within minutes, clips of my hesitation on the run-up were circulating, with captions calling it deliberate. By the time the story that spread within hours was simple and ugly. Sam Whitlock, released by Camden as a teenager, secretly wanted his old club to win and threw away his own club's biggest match in 38 years to settle an old score. Nobody mentioned that I had scored twice in that same match to keep us in it. Nobody mentioned the tackle that won us the penalty in the first place. They only had the miss, and the story practically wrote itself. The club pushed me in front of the media the morning after the final, because cancelling the press conference would have looked worse. I sat behind a table with our press officer, camera flashes going off before I'd even said a word. A reporter from a national paper asked me directly whether my history with Camden Rovers had affected my mindset on the penalty. I told him no, that I wanted to win that match more than almost anything in my career, and that a missed penalty is just a missed penalty. He didn't look convinced, neither did most of the room. The clip of that answer got clipped and reposted with a caption asking whether I even believed my own words. I stopped watching the coverage after that.
My girlfriend, Rachel, works as a physiotherapist at a clinic 2 streets from our flat, and for 2 weeks she came home to find strangers had tagged her social media accounts with messages telling her to leave me before I embarrassed her too. She never mentioned it to me directly. I found out from her sister at a family dinner, and when I asked Rachel about it later that night, she just said she didn't want to add to what I was already carrying. That was worse, somehow, than anything the crowd shouted at me directly. My parents stopped watching sports programs altogether for those 2 weeks, not because they doubted me, but because they couldn't sit through another segment picking apart their son's face in slow motion. Our chairman, Patricia Nolan, called an emergency meeting 2 days after the final. She told the board and the coaching staff that the club was receiving pressure from sponsors and supporters groups to explain what had happened. I sat in that meeting and said the only honest thing I had, that I missed a penalty under pressure, the same as any player could, and that I had no explanation beyond that. Derek didn't say anything in the meeting about the conversation in the physio room. Afterward, alone in his office, he told me he still didn't have proof, and that accusing Grant Aldous publicly without evidence could destroy an innocent man's career and open the club up to legal trouble. I understood his caution. I also felt like I was drowning under a story I couldn't correct.
For 2 weeks, I trained in near silence. Teammates were kind to my face and careful around me otherwise. My own supporters booed me during a friendly against a local non-league side, a match that meant nothing, and I still heard the word traitor from the away end where our own fans stood. The turn came from an unlikely place. Michael Dunmore, our right back, came to my flat one evening with his laptop. He told me he'd been going back through old match footage out of habit, the way some players do when they can't sleep after a loss, and he'd noticed something strange in Camden's video output from the 2 league matches we played against them earlier that season. In both of those matches, Yuri Myers had guessed correctly on my penalties, something he had never managed before those 2 games, and something he hadn't managed in 3 previous seasons against me. Michael pulled up the internal file names on a set of clips Grant had shared with our own coaching staff for scouting purposes weeks before those matches, clips that were supposedly of Camden's set pieces. Buried inside the metadata was a folder Grant had clearly forgotten to remove, containing detailed notes on my penalty technique, time-stamped and shared with an external email address that didn't belong to anyone at Meerport. I brought it to Derek the next morning. He looked at it for a long time without speaking, then picked up the phone and called our head of football operations, a woman named Carol Reyes, who'd handled disciplinary matters at the club for over a decade. Carol didn't go to the press. She went to the Football Association's Integrity Unit, quietly, with the file Michael had found, and asked for a formal review under the rules governing confidential club information. 2 weeks later, the association confirmed that Grant Aldous had shared internal scouting data with a rival club before a competitive fixture, a clear breach of the code that governs football staff, regardless of which club currently employed him. I asked to see Grant myself before any of it became public. Carol arranged it on the condition that I let her sit in the room with me. We met at the club's training ground on a quiet Tuesday morning in the same physio room where Derek had warned me before the final. Grant looked smaller than I remembered him. He didn't try to deny it once I laid out what Michael had found. He told me Camden had approached him 8 weeks before the final, not the other way around, offering him nearly double his Meerport salary and a 3-year contract, at a point when his own contract with us was due to expire and nobody at the club had mentioned renewing it.
He said he told himself sharing a single player's tendencies wasn't the same as fixing a match, that everybody in football traded information in smaller ways all the time. He said he never once considered that it would be me standing over that penalty in the biggest match of the season. I asked him if he ever thought about what it would do to me personally, given everything I'd already been through with Camden. He didn't answer that. He just said he was sorry, and that sorry didn't come close to covering it, and he knew that. I asked him one more thing before Carol ended the meeting. I asked whether he ever thought about warning me himself, even anonymously, once he realized the club's silence about his contract had pushed him toward doing. He said he thought about it more than once in the week before the final, and that he told himself it was too late to undo what he'd already sent, so there was no point saying anything. I told him that reasoning was exactly the problem, that there's almost always a point in saying something, right up until there isn't, and he'd chosen the version of himself that stayed quiet. I didn't forgive him in that room. I told him so directly. I said I understood why he did it. A man worried about his family's future is not the same thing as a villain, but understanding a reason isn't the same as accepting what it cost. He nodded and didn't argue. The Football Association's disciplinary panel banned Grant Aldous from working for any professional football club for 18 months and fined him personally. Camden Rovers, once the review became public, terminated the job offer they had extended him and issued a statement saying the club had no knowledge of how the information was obtained when it was passed along informally to their coaching staff before our 2 league meetings. Whether that statement was entirely true wasn't something I could prove, and I chose not to spend my energy chasing it further. The public story changed almost overnight once the association's findings were released. Sports programs that had run my hesitation on a loop for 2 weeks now ran the leaked scouting data instead. My old academy director, the same man who released me at 7.
I want to be honest about something. That banner didn't erase 3 weeks of being called a traitor in my own home stadium. It didn't give me back the version of that final where I score the penalty and we lift the trophy. Forgiveness from a crowd isn't the same as trust, and trust takes longer to rebuild than a single afternoon of applause. I still think about that 121st minute more than I'd like to admit. I still wonder what happens if I trust my first instinct instead of changing my mind halfway through the run-up. Derek and I talked about it once more, weeks later, in that same physio room. He told me he should have said more that day, been clearer, given me time to actually prepare for a different penalty instead of a half-formed warning 40 minutes before kickoff. I told him he did what he could with the little proof he had, and that I didn't blame him for any of it. I meant it. Meerport signed a new analyst in the off-season, and the club changed its policy on scouting file access, requiring 2 staff members to sign off before any external footage left the building. Small changes, the kind nobody notices unless something has already gone wrong once. As for me, I'm still at Meerport. I turned down 2 transfer offers that came in during the summer, including one from a club willing to pay considerably more than I currently earn. People ask me why I stayed, and I tell them the truth. I didn't choose to leave Camden Rovers as a teenager, and I wasn't going to let anyone push me out of the only club that ever actually chose me. Not over one missed penalty, and not over a story that was never fully mine to begin with. We start pre-season training again in 3 weeks.
I've already told Derek I want to take every penalty we're awarded next season, starting with the first one. No hesitation, no second guessing, whatever the goalkeeper is doing with his weight. Some things you only get to learn them by losing them once. If you want to hear more stories like this one, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because there's a new one waiting for you every week.